So thanks for coming to watch Summer of Soul. We're really, really honored to have Philadelphia's own Questlove with us, director of the feature of your first documentary. How's it feeling? Are you settling in? Are you settling into the position of director?
Am I, yeah, accepting that fact? It's kind of weird. I think, if anything, this film really helped me personally to get over any like remnants of any self-doubt or that sort of thing, because I've never directed before. I directed like a music video way back in like 2002, but yeah, I came in like nervous as a lamb, and now I'm going out like a lion. I love it. I love creativity, and so
Yeah.
there was one point in the pandemic where my girlfriend was actually like, wait, didn't you write a book on this? Like, this should be that the idea that creativity is transferable, like, those who are interested in the culinary world or could have the same use the same process for comedy, the same for writing, so at one point it was very meta that I had to take my own advice and you know uh search for the search and scratch that itch that makes me more confident in it. So yes, the longest answer in the world is I was nervous, but yeah, I like it now. I like the Emperor's New Shoes.
I feel like it's one of these things where, I a lot of us know you as one of our great musicians, but I think you're also one of our great historians, especially music historians, with all of the work that you've done and with teaching and all of these things.
Thank you.
Do you feel like documentary was the next logical art form? It seems to kind of fit in with, the music as history, that great quote that Lynn says in the movie about music is feeling something, and then other people saying that's me too, or the thing about putting memories away. Do you feel like that was the next logical step in kind of communicating?
Absolutely. If anything, I think that was sort of that was the straw that broke the camel's back, as far as like really convincing me that I should tell the story, that this is my story to tell. Because at the end of the day, be it through the music I create, and teaching musical lessons, as far as the liner notes I've written on Roots Records, as far as the articles that I've written when I was like a part-time journalist back in the day, or the books I write, or teaching at NYU, like, teaching history has always been kind of like the underlying thing. I just never, when sometimes you have to step back and take a look at what you've accomplished or what it is that you do to see it. When you're in it, it's really hard to make sense of it all. So I think at the time I didn't think this was necessarily teaching history or teaching a lesson, but I think in every component that I do, that's what comes out. Like, do you learn something while not knowing that you're learning it? So this is true for that case. Yes.
Right. I've heard you describe yourself as kind of like the Statler and Waldorf of watching music documentaries, like other music documentaries. Do you feel like there are things that you were like, you went in and you said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make it like that because I know that this bothers me as a viewer?
Well, the thing is, there's so many factors that you have to consider when you're taking on this task. And one of them is also like finding your voice. Like, I think initially it was like, I want to get out this alive. And then when I don't want to embarrass myself. Like, if you do something creative from a defensive standpoint, it's really not going to work for you in the end. So I'll say, like, once I really got used to the process of what this was turning into, then suddenly I found my voice. And the thing is that my process was the same exact process that I would do if I were curating a DJ set or curating a root show or a show for someone else that, I'm putting their show together. And that process is, I look for the storyline, of course, like the establishing, rising, climax, falling, and ending of the story. And I like to work backwards. Whenever I get a project, my first question is what is it that I want the audience to feel the last 10 minutes of this performance or this presentation? So um, it's the ending is what I dreamt up first, and then the second thing is how do I want it to start? What's the beginning? And so in this case, the Stevie Wonder drum solo to me was like a no brainer because it's something we never seen before, and then the story kind of writes itself once you have your anchors. Like once I have my beginning and my end, I just have to figure out the middle on how to navigate that story. And so that was the process I did for this one.
I was
And
going to say,
so,
go ahead.
well, yeah, I was going to say that my first draft, I initially had my grand finale was going to be the Mavis Staples, Mahalia Jackson summit meeting.
Mhm.
But as with every project, once I do the very first draft, the first thing I do is just kick the Jenga over, mix up the Rubik's cube, and figure out, okay, like challenge yourself. How do you make this even stronger? So, as an ending, it was a polite Hollywood ending, but as a climax, then it forced me putting that part of this movie in the middle forces you to figure out different routes to get to a better storyline. And then once we figured out Nina Simone's voice was the strongest of the lot, then it just made sense to end with Nina Simone and put the summit meeting, the gospel summit meeting, in the middle.
Right.
Mhm.
It's funny you mentioned both curating a DJ set or a root show, but also the Stevie Wonder drum solo. And it's interesting to me because it strikes me as this kind of like the dream curation project. You're obviously not picking who goes on the bill, but you're
Right.
picking moments you want. And there's so many great drum moments, which we don't see in a lot of kind of live, a lot of concert documentaries.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's a thing that comes from you being a drummer.
That was my knowing wink. I was like, okay, if I'm sitting there in the movie theater watching this, what's the first thing, what am I doing as the spectator? And for me, I was just like, well, I know people are going to come in with their arms folded a little bit, like, okay, what is the let me see what Questlove has to do as a director. Like he does everything. He's just doing too much. So it was almost like, I wanted a wink or a sign, uh, something that's like Captain Obvious, but also unexpected. And the thing is, there's over 40 hours of footage. There's a lot of drum solos at this festival, like a lot that I didn't show, like between Sly's drummer and probably the most epic drum solo came from the Chambers Brothers drummer. So like between Sly and the Chambers Brothers and what Max Roach did, and uh, just there was not a lack of percussion. So it was kind of like I'd be remiss and kind of foolish if I didn't sort of give a wink and a nod to my first passion going into my new passion. And it figured it makes sense on people. So yeah, I did it.
The structure of the film is so deceptive because it comes out, you start with the statement of nobody ever seeing this footage, but that's something we see in documentaries. That's something we see a lot, and just like this is unseen footage. But then there's this moment, this shift where it really is starting to talk about cultural erasure. And I'm curious, was there a moment in the process when you said this is what the movie's about, or was it like that from the beginning for you?
The shortest version is I let this film tell its own story. At the very top, yes, my intention was to do exactly just that. Having seen how Sidney Pollack handled Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace film, which sort of puts you in the room, but kind of without context. So you're just watching the performance, but you don't know that, James Cleveland was yelling about his parking spot like a half hour before, or, where to seat the Rolling Stones, like that sort of thing that I, wound up like hounding people later who were there. Like, so tell me, that sort of thing. Tell me about it. But in this particular case, because I am such an Easter egg, I always like the car engine better than I like the car. The real challenge was like, how can I scratch the itch of my curiosity of how something got done, as
Right.
opposed to, like people always say, like, just be in the other moment, stop documenting the moment, like be in the other moment. So at the end of the day, initially, like I was going all over the place, like away from the festival and to teach you about the history of Motown and the transition they were going through in 1967 and all this. And then, at the end of the day, we decided to really just always try to keep it inside the festival, even if we were giving lessons on why certain things occurred. It was just a lot as far as like my age range and people that were born before me. I knew that it was easier to bring them aboard. I really wanted this film to be more timeless for millennials and Gen Z, like anyone born after like 95 that really has no context whatsoever. So only because the times that we were living in right now were mirroring exactly what happened 50 years ago, as far as what caused the festival to be shown in the first place. So for me, it was important to show context for why these things happened.
Right. And there's kind of a through line from early on, talking about the idea of how do you color a sound and the
Yes.
different types of sounds, to the place where we're literally talking about the term unapologetically Black. And you go from A to B there in a really kind of beautiful, seamless way, without hitting the audience over the head with it.
Yeah, it's because there's a lot to deal with. You know, I love especially talking to the fifth dimension, only because oftentimes people are just learning a term that Black people have used a long time called code switching.
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle has a really brilliant joke where he says that Black people come on Earth equipped speaking two languages. One is Ebonics, the other language is job interview. And so no, that's a profound statement.
Yeah.
And you know having done the research, especially with the fifth dimension, I noticed that this particular performance of theirs is way more looser, way more relaxed
Mhm.
than the other fifth dimension performances I've seen on like the Ed Sullivan Show and the Tonight Show with Jack Parr. Like, there they cross their T's, dot their I's, very polite and that sort of thing. So I was kind of thrown back, like, wow, they're really relaxed. I never heard Billy Davis Jr. singing his like gruff tenor, like that sort of James Brownie way. And there was something familiar about that for me because having come from a band in which one night you're opening for Soundgarden and then the next night you're with the Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you have to flick the lights on, flick the lights off. And, we're used to it now. Like, I think back then code switching was such a new idea. It's like, okay, you have 1 foot planet, and they weren't the only ones. Sly and the Family Stone went through that. Nina Simone was going through that. It's almost like, do you play the middle? Do you play to a more mainstream path, or do you, double down on the struggle of Black people? Do you try to fight your way into the Copa Lounge? And there's, for an entertainer back then, was such a conflict that I wanted to show that as well in this film. The idea of having to please two separate audiences and the conflict of that.
Do you feel like you often think about performance code switching? I mean, you do so much, between doing the Tonight Show and then also, doing a show in Philly,
I know.
you do so many varied audiences. It's like,
Well, this is why I wrote the Creative Quest book. In 2018. The reason why I wrote it was because um, to show people that the common denominator is actually creativity. Because I know it would be very easy. Like, I'm making it very easy for people to start ridiculing that I'm a jack of all trade and a master of none. Like, okay, it's one thing if you're like writing books, teaching, drumming, scoring, and acting on TV and directed a movie. But if you're like bad at all of them, then it's like it's for naught. Like, better
Yeah.
to be good at one thing than everything. But I do think that the lane that I'm exploring is more or less just showing people how creativity really works. And even if you don't have um what you feel the necessary criteria is, like a mental like level of filmmaking, that it's not that it's channeling and listening to your voice. So once all the panic and the fear subsides, um then you're left with clarity and good ideas. And that's, to me, it's important to be a great creator than it is to be an expert.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because you made this film that's very much about coming together. And in a lot of ways, the moments of cultural erasure we see in Hollywood about Black history are often like tragedies that have been forgotten. And in a way, this is one of the most celebratory stories of things that have been forgotten. But then unfortunately had to premiere at a time when we literally couldn't come together.
Right.
Do you feel like it is almost like watching that footage is almost like a moment of catharsis, especially in 2021?
I believe that, yes, this footage hits just a little bit different now that we're kind of in the times that we're in, which is why, like, you can't plan lightning in a bottle. Right. Of course, if this film goes down, if this film is the sugar that makes the medicine go down easy for people in life, then I will gladly take that. I'll take that compliment. However, I will say that it's Black joy is often kind of overlooked as terms of components that we also need to tell. And I think we're learning that now. Like, there's a period in which it was almost like everything aimed at us was tragedy porn. And there's a difference between telling the truth and not forgetting history and how to present it. And if you're just showing one side of the story, like, okay, we're only getting hosed down by water, or dogs attacking us during the civil rights era, or police shootings, or whatever. Like, there has to be a balance. And what's weird is, with this film, my main question was like, wow, would this have changed my life the same way that Woodstock changed the lives of so many other millions in America? Like, would this have been that for me? What wound up being a suitable replacement for this film, Soul Train actually wound up being the cultural sort of juggernaut that grabbed Black America and subsequently the world, as far as like Black joy is concerned, in entertainment and dancing and fashion. This film could have been that, if presented a certain way, if it was presented in the sort of same light and held in the light as Woodstock was, because none of those Woodstock artists were household names until the movie came out.
Right.
And then the movie defined a generation and defined a time, that sort of thing. I mean, so yeah, this film should have had the same results, but it wound up being Soul Train having that result. But I think there needs to be a balance of it, because I mean, there was also a time, I'll say in 1997, where we had a first wave of like Black joy, where we were more celebratory, and hip hop was getting success, and we made it. It was like a winning lottery ticket. But we kind of leaned too far on the other side and was just all celebratory. And then, the dangers of forgetting history and the culture and whatnot kind of left us in a place where we were numb about it. So I think now's the time to have a better balance of Black joy and of remembering history.
Right.
This is that time.
So much of our history is, and I say our meaning humanity, is marked by musical moments, is marked as a way to look at this is this era, this is this era. And I know it's sort of impossible to predict, but I'm curious what you think will be, the contemporary musical moments that will mark, if there was 10-year-old Questlove or 15-year-old Questlove right now, what would be the things that would be the most influential to you, do you feel?
In watching this film?
Or no, this moment in time, contemporary, like at this time.
The main seed that I think that should be planted isn't necessarily like a specific song or a specific movie or a specific book or TV show. It's being creative and also using your voice, finding creative ways to be an activist and to use your voice. Because to me, oftentimes, people might be afraid to speak up or speak out, that sort of thing. Or it just feels as though it's not in vogue. There were periods where, like 15 years ago, we released a record and fan base is like, you guys aren't as fun as you used to be. Like, can't y'all go back to just freestyle lyrics? And but for me, I don't know, as a young person, what I want them to take from this is not just something specific, but just the power of how to use the art form to spread their activism. That to me is the most important part.
Right. I think we have to wrap up soon, but I wanted to ask, now that you got the bug, are you planning to stay in documentary? Are you going to do more? You have a story on the horizon?
Very much so. The doors have opened, and yes, indeed, I'm working on the Sly and the Family Stone documentary right now as we speak. And there's about 3 or 4 other projects of this caliber that I'm also working on that I'm not going to mention just yet, but yeah, I will be occupied for this entire decade.
Well, that's amazing. And
thank you.
Speaking on behalf of Philadelphia, we miss you and we can't wait. So
I'm so, you don't even get how excited I am. Like, knowing of the Philly Film Society, and having been to a few events and seen, this, like in my years through Philly, like I never once thought that this would be a kind of a venue or a space that I would, be in. I'm always at the theater on Sampson Street. Like I feel like I live there. So this is worth it. This is literally the reason why I did it. This is very specific. Yeah. Thank you.
That means so much, because films like this are why we do it. So thank you so much, Questlove, and thanks for coming to take the time out to do it. All right.